All right. Thanks, Harvey. Good evening, everyone. Beautiful evening. Um, anyway, but we're here and we're gonna learn something tonight. So this one has, I guess it's the fourth one. As Harvey said, this one's been seems to be a lot of anticipation about this one. So hopefully, we all get something out of it. The plan tonight is essentially walk through the process of taking a drone, flying it, capturing the data for an orthomosaic, and then processing the data and bringing it into the GIS, hopefully, when we're done and everything works. So the steps that we're going to follow, and I apologize, but logistically to make this work, what we're going to do is the things that I'm going to be covering here on the desktop. We'll do that, but there's steps that have to happen in the field, obviously. So those have been pre-recorded, and I'm essentially going to play a video of that part and explain it as I'm going. So in terms of steps that you're going to actually see tonight, we're going to do the pre-flight planning, so actually creating the shapefile and a KMZ file that we need in order to create that area route that we're going to fly. We're going to load that up onto the drone and do this setup there for that. We'll actually do the flight. I haven't recorded the whole thing, but a good portion of it so that you get a sense of what that looks like. We'll bring it back, download the data. RTK correction, we'll actually go through that step just because if you're thinking if you may have a drone with RTK or if you're thinking of another one, I would certainly recommend it, especially here in Nova Scotia, just because there's access to that data so easily. So then we'll process the data. We're going to be using reality capture, sorry for that, which is a free version. And the workflow, if you're just doing an orthomosaic, is really simple. So we'll go through that and then we'll take the data and pull it into the GIS and see if it all worked. That's the plan. Just a little bit of background on what you're going to be seeing. So we're going to be using my drone, which is a DJI Mavic 3M, the M being multispectral. However, the majority of people would be using the 3E, which is essentially the same. We're not going to be using the multispectral camera, so it's essentially equivalent to the Mavic 3E. And the workflow would be very similar to the new version or the new 4 that's out. As I mentioned, the goal here is just to go through the workflow to get a good quality orthomosaic in the simplest way that we can. So we're not going to be using DJI Terra. Typically, if I'm doing this, that's what I'll use. But if I want to just quick orthomosaic, reality capture it's free and it's quite simple and easy to use. So that's the one that we're going to do there. And then we're not going to be doing further analysis. So there's all kinds of things. Once you have that data, there's all kinds of things, especially with the digital surface model that you can do. We're not going to be covering that. We've talked about some of those things in previous webinars. Okay, so that's the plan. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So we're going to start by creating a polygon of the boundary of the area that we want to fly. So to do that, I'm going to be using, tonight we'll use ArcGIS. Just as easily use QGIS to do that. It's all good. So we are going to be, so we're in beautiful downtown Roberta right now. So this is my house right here. And we're going to be flying this part of this peninsula, which is just across the pond from where we're at. So we need to create a shapefile, polygon of some kind, or directly to a KMZ of that area that we can then take and load onto the drone. So in this case, it's pretty straightforward. I know I'm sitting here. I can see that area quite easily. It's not too far away. I'm not going to lose the drone over the top of a hill or anything like that. But an important step that you need to think about and get used to thinking about when you're doing the pre-planning is, okay, where am I going to be doing this from? Can I see the area from there? So bringing in elevation data or something like that is really helpful. Because oftentimes you may need to break if you're trying to get an orthomosaic of both sides of a hill, for example, may need to fly from one side and then the other side to get that, which is not a problem. But typically you would set that up as two different flight plans, essentially. But in this case, we can see the area, we can see the airspace. We don't really have any concerns from that point of view. So personally, I have a shapefile, actually it's a geodatabase set up that I use to keep track of wherever I'm going to be flying. So we'll just use that. But essentially all that I'm going to do, so I've got this area here. This is my geodatabase that I'm going to enter a new area into. I'm going to create a new area. I'm going to do it as a polygon, and then I'm just going to digitize in that polygon that I want to fly. Simple, simple. Keep track of it. I just have a name field set up here. So call this webinar demo. Oops. And that's it. So I'm going to hit save. So now we've captured that. We need to convert it to a, we need to convert it to a KMZ file. When you read the literature and DJI instructions and so on, it talks that yes, you can use a KML, but for some reason that never seems to work for me. So I just do it as a KMZ file. So I'm going to go into geoprocessing. I'm going to search on KMZ because I can never remember exactly what the command is. So I'm going to go layer to KML. It'll convert it to, we can pick that here. So I'm going to pick this one that I just created. And then I'm going to specify where I want to save it. So for the stuff this evening, I've already set up a folder with some stuff in it, as you'll see on the desktop. Webinar flight. So let's just save it right here, and we're going to save it as KMZ, save. Okay, so that's all that we need to do here at home in advance on the desktop. Oftentimes, I'll go to the next step of actually loading it. Well, I guess you do need to load it onto the controller here before we leave the office. And oftentimes I'll actually set up the flight, the parameters that I want to fly at here in the office rather than having to do it in the field. But that part's entirely up to you. So this is the controller for the majority of the sort of enterprise DJI drones. I've connected it to my computer with this USB cable so that I can copy the files over. That's the simplest way to do it. So I'm going to go in here, and I've got, this is my drone, my flight controller, and here is, why did that not save? See, this is what happens. Let's go back. Oh, run. Oh, there we go. Okay, so now I've got my webinar flight KMZ file. Just going to copy that, and I'm going to go over to my drone controller. I'm going to put it in DCIM. I've got a folder called flight plans. Copy and replace. Obviously, I've done this before, so we're just making a copy of that. Okay, so now what we have is a KMZ file on the drone, on the controller for the drone. The next step that we need to do is actually import that into the flight planning and create the flight plan with that KMZ for that specific area. So in order to see what's going on here, I've actually created a video here. So I'm going to run this, and I will kind of pause it and talk about it as it's going through. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so turning it on, it's a little, if you haven't used these before, or I guess many things are getting like this. It's one quick press and then hold down longer in order to actually turn it on the on button. So you can see it turning on there. Give it a moment to start up. Essentially, it's Android with the DJI controller software sitting on top of it. So there's probably lots of other things you could actually do to this. It'll automatically load the DJI Assistant flight controller. So on here, I'm going to basically, I've hit flight routes or planning. So the next step here is I'm going to create a new one. So I'm going to press this press this little plus button to create a new flight. I'm going to import the route from the one that we just created. So I'm going to go to that folder that we just stored it in, go down, try to find it, and confirm. And then I'm going to pick area route. So you can fly like linear route would be a common example is flying power lines or hydro corridors, that type of thing. You can also fly to different waypoints and do things. Forestry, the vast majority of times you're going to be flying an area route. So I'm going to pick area route. Did it before, so I'm going to replace the other one. So now it's created that sort of project. If I click on that and open it, it actually shows me that KMZ file that I created, and it has already created these preliminary flight paths or routes that it's going to fly. So that's what you're seeing there in the green. However, we're going to take a step and actually edit the parameters that we're going to use to fly for that. So continue on here. So I click on it, click the edit button. Okay, so now we're basically going to set this up for our case. The first thing that I need to do is actually pick the drone that we're using and the camera. So, or the camera type that's on that drone. So you noticed I picked 3M, the multispectral, because that's what's on here. However, on the lens, I'm not flying multispectral. I'm just going to pick the RGB. I could pick both, but for tonight we're just doing RGB. So I'm going to pick RGB and continue. So the next thing here that you're looking at, so this is ground sampling distance that you're seeing here. So you could actually, so of course the ground sampling distance depends on the height. So you could do this two ways. You could actually set the ground sampling distance that you want, and then the controller will calculate what height it needs for that. Or you can pick the height and it'll update the ground sampling distance that you want to do. So most of the time, as you'll see here when we go through this, I'd like to pick the height. I'm in the habit of picking 350 feet. I've done this a bunch of times, and that's when that seems to be the best compromise between speed. So the higher you go, the more area you can cover and still getting a good quality there. So the altitude mode, AGL is above ground level. So when we're doing that and picking real-time follow, essentially, so there's a digital elevation model that preloads into the controller. And when it does that, it follows a flight path that follows the altitude you specified, and then the drone automatically adapts its height. So it's flying up and down in order to maintain that above ground level of 350 feet that I'll set here in a moment. I have, if you notice, so ground sampling distance 1.26 at an altitude of about 154. When I change that to 350, it's going to update. There we go. Oh, you can't quite see that. So it's like 2.6 centimeters, which is fine, right? That's really good resolution. So the other thing that we're setting here is the takeoff height. So essentially that's like how far it goes up before it starts taking off. I usually set it to like 100 feet just to make sure I'm above any power lines or any kind of obstructions that might be in the way. So I'm going to set that to 100. Speed is the next big one. It's kind of windy when we flew this, so setting it at 15 miles per hour. You can go up to 20 if it's a really bright sunny day. Yeah, it all depends on how much area you have and so on. So around 15 is a good one. Course angle, you notice it's adjusting here. As I'm moving this, you'll see these orange bars or lines change. So the reason you would do that is, so there's a couple things. One is the wind. So there, you can set it so it most efficiently covers the area, right? If you put it at a weird angle, it's going to take more times to do it. There's also wind to think about. So depending on the wind, you want to fly directly into or out of the wind. You don't want to be crosswind, essentially. So you can set the course angle to vary depending on that. And then the other thing is if I'm doing an area that's going to require battery swaps, then I'll make sure it's a large area, so it's not going to finish the whole thing on one battery. Then I'll do it so that's kind of flying back and forth across where I'm located, if that's possible, or comes closer to me, so that if I do need to do a battery swap, it doesn't have to fly the entire length of the project, essentially. So those are kind of the things that I think about when I'm doing that. So the next setting that we're looking at here is, okay, when it's done, what does it do? The default is return to home. That's, I don't know why you would do anything else, but essentially when it's done, it just automatically flies home, as you'll see. So we're going to pick that. We're going to go down to advanced settings. So here is where you define the overlap, both side to side and front to back. So basically what percentage of each photo is covered by the other photo. I've played around with this somewhat. The more overlap you have, the better quality that you're going to get, but also the longer it takes to fly it and the longer it takes to process it. For the most part, I just leave the defaults of 70% side overlap and then the frontal overlap of 80. Margin, if you want to fly outside of the area that you have, so kind of a buffer outside of the area that you've defined, you can set that. And then photo mode can be either timed photo or distance-based photo. I don't find it makes too much of a difference. I just seem to leave it on the default of time. Takeoff speed, you can change that. I usually leave it on max. So then the other thing you can do, now that I'm in the controller here, you can see, if you didn't quite get the boundaries right, there's the opportunity to edit them here. So I seem to have been not covering the full area, so we'll increase that up to cover the area that we want to fly. And that's essentially it. So I'm going to hit save, and that's our flight mission has been planned. So you can see here, it's not very clear. So the estimated time duration for this area is 6 minutes, essentially. And it's going to take 107 photos to do that, right? So that's just some information about it. But it's good to know before you go to fly it how long. As you're doing this, as you change different parameters, you'll see the time update, which is good to keep track of for sure. Okay. I think that's it. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Okay. So that's the setup. So we're now in the field. We've loaded the flight plan onto the controller. We have the drone. So in the field, essentially we're going to go take this, put this someplace safe. Really important that there's nothing around it, nothing above it, obviously. So make sure you've got good clear there. You want a good line of sight to where you're going to be flying. If you're in an area, so when this takes off, obviously there's a lot of dust and stuff gets kicked up, and hay, grass, leaves, those types of things. So it's good to put down something solid for it to sit on. In this case, it's on a fairly coarse gravel, so I didn't bother with that, as you'll see here in a minute. But essentially, those are the things that you want to think about. And as you'll see, if you haven't seen this done before, essentially, we're not going to be flying the drone. We're going to press play. We're going to upload the data, do a flight check, press play, and then watch it and monitor it. We're not actually flying it. It's flying the course. It's doing all of the things that it needs to do and returning home when it's done. And all we're doing is monitoring and watching it. Okay, so let's play the next video here. So we've got the drone turned on. We're a safe distance away from it, and we have the controller. So we've loaded that up already, but now we need to transfer that to the drone itself. So we'll let this load up. So that if hopefully you can hear that, there's a voice there saying home point updated, which means the controller has found where it's connected to the drone and knows where it is in space, so it can come back to that space. When it comes home, it's going to come home to exactly the same spot. So we're going to pick the flight route that we had created earlier. Um, we don't have to edit anything in there or anything like that. But essentially, at this point, what we need to do, so we're going to check some of the things here. I think we've got this the same as we did before. Essentially, we're just double checking things. See if I set it up right. Yeah. So we hit save, and now we're going to hit the little blue button, which is essentially play. Sorry, you can't see that. Okay, so now this is the pre-flight checklist. So there's a number of things that you need to check and double check and so on before you actually take off. Um, so for example, the return to home height. So at what height do you want it to return home at? Um, how far away it can actually fly, the maximum flying height, so 400 feet is what it is. You can set those types of things. You can specify what to do if it senses, so it has sensors around it to sense if it's coming close to anything, and it'll automatically stop. So what does it do when it does that stop? Uh, all of those types of things. For the most part, the defaults are there, but always good to check that. So once we've gone through that, we're going to press start to go ahead and start it. Do that. We go over and see the drone. So we haven't done anything but hit a sheep go there. So that was a sheep, not a goat. So it's taken off. It's now climbing to that 100 feet that we had specified. And it's going to go fly over to the area where we're going to be flying. So now when we're looking at the controller, we're seeing what the drone is seeing. So this is the main camera that it's looking out of. We can flip between different cameras and views. If we pause here for 1 second, you'll see a number of things. So the speed, it's flying at 25 miles per hour. The wind speed is 26.8. So this normally on a day, I wouldn't bother trying to fly, especially if it's a large area. I wouldn't try to fly on a day where the wind speed is over 20. Um, you start getting warnings, as you'll see later in the video, we're going to get a warning about the wind speed. Um, so the wind speed, below 20, you want a sunnier day than what you're seeing here for a really good flight. Um, and typically, what you want to do is fly between 10 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. That's ideal because the sun is directly overhead. You're not dealing with shadows and all of those types of things. And you can see here we're flying at altitude of 359 feet, essentially. It's flying at 25 miles per hour, the direction, etc. So let this play out. So it's flying over to the start point of where it's going to start capturing this data. This is another view. So these are the sensors around it. So the main camera is going to be pointed down, taking the pictures. It also has these cameras that you can look around with as the drone is flying as well. And then the other view is actually a map that shows you on that map that we saw, it shows you where on that flight route is it actually at. Okay, so it's now come into close to position and it's starting to take the pictures, right? So it's essentially at this point, it's just flying that route that we preset in there. I can look at the different views as it's flying, the main camera, and then also the map. So you can see it traveling. The little green spot, that's the start point, and then it's flying those purple lines as it's going through there. So again, you can see we've got the altitude that it's flying at, the speed that it's flying at, wind direction, now making a turn, flying along. You can see it's along that back portion, taking the pictures. Now it's going to fly up there. So one thing I'll mention, so battery percentage, you can see, so the connection to the drone, so the physical, not the physical, the connection between the drone and the controller is this indication here. So we've got 3 bars, so that's really good. If it gets too low, then that's a problem. You want to send it back. If it actually loses connection entirely, then it automatically triggers a return to home and it'll fly home. The other thing to keep a close look on is the battery percentage. So we're at 91% here. Typically on a regular day, you'll get about 25, 30 minutes before it gets down to like 30%. When it gets to 30%, I typically will send it home and switch the batteries. To do that, all you need to do is press, so this is a pause button here. So I'm going to pause the flight. It stops and hovers. Then hold down this home button essentially. And when you do that, it just automatically flies home, comes back to the same spot, comes down. Then you can swap the battery. And then once you've done that, if you've pressed pause, there's a resume button. Press resume, and it just flies up, goes back to where it left off, and continues. Um, so as I mentioned before, when you're planning the flight route, it's good to have ones that come towards you so that you're not, if you do need to switch the battery, it's not all the way at the back of the project, and you can do that. If you need to avoid something, so you're out there flying and suddenly there's a helicopter appears or there's something like that, again, if you hit pause, then you can fly the drone yourself. I'm not going to cover how to do that, but you obviously that's something you need to learn or practice. So then you can fly out of the way, drop down, whatever you need to do, and then hit resume, and it'll go back to where it was and carry on. Okay, so we're just continuing to watch. It's taking the pictures, and that's essentially that for that. So I stopped there. Sorry, we didn't do the entire capture. And then it picks up again here where it's getting closer to being done. The whole thing, as I said, is like 5 minutes. It's a very small area. Okay, so let's pick it up with this video when it's getting closer to done. Looking at the map, you can see it's got this last one to do. So it's flying down that path. Once it gets there, the final step, it'll actually turn and fly an oblique into the block. So and then or sorry, the project area. So it's changes the angle of the camera, and that's just to help it better align photographs once it's done. So there you can see the camera angle is changed, flying in. There, so you're getting a high wind velocity. I think it triggers at about 22, something like that. And again, if I was doing a larger project, I would probably pause, go home. So there, this, this is, so now it's showing the view or the path that it's going to follow to go directly home. Again, we're not flying this, it's automatically doing that. So we'll watch it come back. Well, now I don't know if you can hear that. You can actually hear it now. So here it is. Now, obviously back to the view from the phone, watching it land. There's been a couple times when it hasn't come back to the exact same spot, and you have to actually pause it and then fly it over to a spot and land it manually. But say 99% of the time, it's literally within inches of where it actually took off from. Okay, so that's it. So at this point, you're going to go over and shut off the drone. I'll pause there. Stop that. I think that's it. On the back, so in the back of it, there's an SD card right here, right? So that SD card is where all of the images have been saved. So the next step is actually taking that SD card and then transferring that data over onto your computer. So obviously, once you get home, take the SD card, connect it to your computer, copy it over. When you do that, essentially what you get is hundreds of photographs and then also files that it's using for corrections and all of those types of timestamps, all of those types of things. You really don't need to worry too much about what those are, other than copy it over to a place where you can actually access it to do the next step of processing. Okay, so we now have the data. It's all of the images, it's on there. Optional, this next step is optional. So if you've got an RTK drone, you can actually go through the process of correcting that data, or fixing, making the positioning a little bit more accurate. For Northern Mosaic, it's really not necessary. If you get into more accurate things and you want to compare them to historical LiDAR data and those types of things, then it becomes more important. But so next step, you're going to go to this website, sorry, here. So I can throw that in the chat here in a minute. But essentially, this is federal government one, a map of all of the active control systems across the country. And as we talked about before, we've got all of these ones here in Nova Scotia for some reason. So what we do is we're going to zoom in to where we are. You have to log in actually, so you need to create an account in order to do this. So we are here, so we're going to pick Port Hawkesbury. Click on that, say, okay, this is the one that I want to use. So what we're doing is downloading the correction data, which we're then going to use to correct our data. So then some settings here. So we want 1 second, we want RINEX3. We need to pick the date and time when we flew this. So this was actually flown on the 14th, and it was flown a little bit after 9 o'clock in the morning. So we're going to say start hour 9, end hour 10. It was only 5 minutes. It's in there somewhere. Satellite system, GNSS, precise orbits, NAD 83. Again, these are the settings that you want. We want ephemerise and we want clock correction. And then we've got these files that it's going to use. So essentially it's based on your corrections and your time, the base station that you're using, when you're using and what your specifications are. It gives you these files. You hit a submit request and it's going to go off and actually gather those files and provide them as a download. So it only takes a little bit of time, but we'll skip ahead because we've already done this. So when it does that, it gives you this zip file, essentially, with a whole bunch of files inside of it that we're going to be using for the correction. The correction, you're actually going to use a program which is free called MLID Studio. To download MLID Studio, we can, just go to MLID, just search MLID Studio download, and you'll find it. But essentially what it is it gives you this little utility here, which is going to take the correction data and apply those corrections to your photographs. So there's a few steps to do here. So there's specific files that it's going to be looking for. So on the drone, so if you remember, we copied this down as raw data like that. And so we're going to pick that file from our drone data. The base, it's going to be looking for that file that we downloaded from the correction data. So we're going to pick that file. There's only the one there. And then the navigation file, again, from the drone, raw data. So there's that .nav file. We're going to grab that. And the MRK from the drone, which is in that same folder again. And once we've done that and hit process, here's all of our points. So it's captured the points from the photographs, done the corrections. And then the very last step, we just say update original. Oh, sorry, I got to pick the folder. So we're going to pick the folder that those are in. Sorry, desktop. So we pick that folder and then update original photos. I've already done it, so I won't do it again, but essentially that's all there is to it. Once you've done that, it's taken the correction data, applied it to your photos. Again, this is optional. You don't need to do this step. But if you have an RTK drone, it will add accuracy to it. Okay, so we have our photos downloaded. We've corrected them. The next thing we're going to do is use Reality Capture, which is a free program. It's actually through, I think, Epic Games. So typically this software is used for building worlds, for gaming and all of those types of things. It's free if you or the company you work for make less than $1 million. So I think most of us are safely in that zone. But to download it, you need to go to Epic Games, create an account, and then from there you can actually download the program, and then it's free. It downloads onto your computer, and you can use it from there. Okay. So the next step, we're going to actually open Reality Capture, and you'll see why. So most of these software, there's a million different things that you can configure and settings you can make and all of those types of things. We're not going to do that. Instead, and part of the reason we're going to use Reality Capture is that there's a very simple wizard that takes you through how you do that. So I've downloaded Reality Capture. I've opened it up. I'm not going to worry about all of these settings. All I'm going to do is go over to Map Wizard here, and then I'm going to pick the folder that my images are saved in. So go to Desktop, Webinar Flight. We had that raw data, select folder. So it's found 95 of them. And we don't have control points. Not going to worry about that part. I'm just going to hit next. So it's found them. It says, okay, this is the area that you're working in. I could change the boundaries of this if I wanted to. Don't really see a need. I'm just going to hit next. Next is map and model. If I want to create a digital surface model as well, which we might as well while we're here, then I'm going to click map and models and click next and then hit go. So when I do that, so I'm not going to hit go because I've already done it. And it typically takes about, so for this project, I think on my computer, which is a pretty powerful desktop PC with a GPU and 128 gigs of RAM, it took about 20 minutes to process this small area. So it's significant, right? It's going to take quite a bit of time, especially if you're just doing it on your laptop. You're probably not going to be able to do a big area, but you can definitely do smaller areas. So I'm not going to hit go. When you do, it just sits there and works until it's done. And when it's done, it pops back up. So this is essentially the result of that. So what we're looking at here, again, we're not going to worry too much about the settings. There's all kinds of views and so on. You don't need to worry too much about that. I've got all of the individual photos on there and there's information about it. But in this 2D view, I've got essentially what is my orthomosaic. So I can zoom in. So it's stitched all of those images together into one georeferenced orthomosaic. As I zoom around, I can look at different things. Now, what's interesting is hardwood leaf off. The way it works, it's finding the same point in multiple photographs and triangulating in order to capture the position of that point. with leaf off hardwood. If you're looking at little limbs, it's really hard and confusing for it to do that. So you don't tend to get really good accuracy on the hardwood in leaf off. In the orthomosaic here, it's fine. You can tell they're hardwoods and you can get a good sense of what it is. So I'm zooming in here, moving around. Um, the softwood trees are looking really good. The hardwoods are a little bit sketchy. These ones are a little bit better. But that's the kind of resolution that you can expect, right? I can zoom to about there and still make sense of it. Then there's also a 3D view. So this one you can zoom in and out. You can also tilt and zoom. So essentially it's a 3D model. So I can zoom in here. It looks pretty fishy. It's not great. Again, if we were using DJI Terra, I think we'd probably get a better result. But you can see what happens in the hardwoods. It just kind of falls apart because of that positional accuracy. Um, when you do it with leaf on, you get a much better result. Yeah, see, this is where it's getting over here and there's fewer images to rely on. It gets really sketchy, but you can get a sense of the softwoods. It's pretty good, right? So, oh, and then let's see what, um, this bank looks like. So this actually, this would be interesting. So there's all kinds of erosion along the lake here. It would be interesting to compare this to when the LiDAR was taken to see, because you could actually measure how much coastline have we lost. Okay. Okay, enough playing around with that. So again, all kinds of settings. You can improve this. There's lots of things that you can do here in reality capture. We're not going to focus on that. We're trying to make this as simple as we possibly can. So the next step that we actually want to do is just clicking export. So if you go here, there's a little export button. Um, there's lots of things that you could potentially do, but an orthomosaic projection. So that's again the imagery and a digital surface model. So if we just click on that, I've already done it, so I'm not going to do it again. Put it where you want to save it, give it a name. It dumps it out as a TIFF file. That's it. Then come back and you would do the same thing for the digital surface model. And then essentially you're done in reality capture. It's stitched the photographs together, done what it needs to do, and we've now export that out into a TIFF, which we can use in our GIS. Okay, so let's keep moving right along here. So we'll go back to ArcGIS where we were. And now if we go to that folder and we save them in export. So we've got a DSM, digital surface model TIFF, and we've got an ortho TIFF. So let's just grab those and put them in here and see what we get. So because of the resolution, it's going to take a minute for that to load. So let's give it a minute. Okay, there we go. So we've now brought our orthomosaic into our GIS. We can do whatever it is that we want to do, our planning, operational planning, all of those types of things. Again, let's let the resolution catch up. But you can see even, so this was not ideal. It was a windy day. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. We should have been doing it on a sunny day and later, and we would have got better results, but still, ignoring the hardwood, which is, you can tell it's hardwood, but that's not too great. But otherwise, I can pick out fir versus spruce and lots of other things in there. So that's really good. So let's see how now if you remember when we're looking at a 3D image, the digital surface model I'm expecting is probably not very good because of that hardwood was really throwing it off. But let's drag that in there and see what we got here. Anyway, so DSM, bring that over and take a look. Okay. Yeah, I can already tell that's not very good. Just change the color scheme. I'm used to looking at it this way. yeah, so it kind of fell apart in this hardwood over here. We go to some of the softwood though, we should, if we compare, oh yeah, we can pick, oh yeah, so here's, I look at our DSM, literally a tall tree here. If I look at our ortho, yes. And there it is. Oh, there's a pine tree. Anyway, I won't play around. Essentially, that's it. So yeah, the DSM, had we done it leaf on, we would have got a much better result. Um, the other thing that I'll add, we're not going to do here. So there's lots of other steps that you can then take to add further value to this data. So the primary one is, so this is a digital surface model. So it's the absolute height of the canopy. If you take this value and subtract from the provincially available digital elevation model, which is the ground level, if you subtract one from the other, just using raster calculator in here or QGIS, then that's going to give you the canopy height model difference. There's some tweaking. Sometimes it's off by 1 or 2 meters and you need to kind of check ground, validate some of those and add that into your math. But essentially, that's the step that you would take in order to get a canopy height model, and then on and on from there. But as I said, the purpose here was just to get to the point of a good quality orthomosaic, which I think we have. So I'm going to stop there, and I think we'll switch over to questions.